Now then, we've called roll, success. We're going to talk about the syllabus today. It's really boring. I know that. You know that. We're going to get through it rather quickly. Maybe. Before we do that, I have like an icebreaker thing I do. Some of your other classes may have been doing this. Here's what I want. Your name, where you're from, kind of what you're doing in school. There's different ways to take this. Some people are like, I'm a freshman, I'm this major. Some people, one guy one semester told me he wanted to study to be an NFL head coach. I don't know what classes you take to do that. I don't. He also dropped out of mine, so I don't know. Maybe he got it. Maybe he's on his way. And then an interesting fact about yourself. Caveat here, please do not share anything you don't want shared, okay? I tell this to every class. The worst one I ever had, a student told us that when she got nervous, she would eat baking soda. Yeah, and there was a reaction, kind of like some of you just reacted, and she took offense to that, which is her right to take offense, but at the same time, nobody asked you to say some weird shit to everybody, right? Like that's, so just don't, if you think about your fact, you'd be like, oh, that's too strong, then don't share that, right? Okay. So I'll model for you. As I've said probably several times now, my name is Tim Payne. I go by Tim. That's what people have called me my entire life, because it is my name. I understand you guys might not be totally comfortable with that. I get a lot of Mr. Payne, which makes me sound like a lame supervillain. If that's what you want to do, that's fine. I get it. I don't really care for Mr. Tim. That's weird. Just nothing insulting, ultimately. Bitch. Don't call me bitch. Kind of like that. What's the next one? Oh, I'm from Douglasville, which is pretty close to here. Some of you might be familiar with it. It's a town. I mean, it's fine. I'm so old, I remember when they built the mall. They used to all be woods and like swamp back there. We used to go play. You can't go play back there now. You should. Okay, school. I went here for my bachelor's in English, which is super lucky. I also got a master's here in Lit, and then I studied at the University of Alabama for 4 years, it's kind of hard, a bunch of years. I studied poems. I was not able to finish that degree because my wife had children. Children change your life irrevocably, as it turns out. And on that note, my interesting fact is I am not interesting. I have a wife and a mortgage, I have 2 kids, I have a bad back, I'm very tired most of the time. I'll show you a picture of my kids real quick. They're pretty cute in pictures. Sometimes they're not cute, sometimes they're very much not. Alright, so this is just a little GIF. This is Sam, he is 3. He is about to spray his brother in the face with that's Jack, he's 4. And you can't see it's kind of small, but he is super pumped to be spraying him in the face. Yeah, I don't know. So it's pretty fun, stuff like that. Anyway, so that's what we do. Like I said, name, where you're from, kind of school, what's going on with you, however you like to interpret that. And then an interesting fact that you don't mind us knowing. Let's be clear on that. Okay. And on that note, last but not least,
I'm Erica, but I go by Grace, and I am an English major from Ringgold, Georgia, and I'm actually just sitting in the class. I'm your SI leader, so I will hold sessions for you guys, and I'll basically just reinforce the lectures. I won't write your essays for you, but I can help you. And emails that come from me will come from eBeagle1, because my name is Erica, not technically Grace. And I'm still working out my session times, but I'm trying to do some virtual and in person, so you can pick and choose kind of when you want to come.
Cool. And just so everybody's clear, SI stands for Supplemental Instruction. Like she said, she's not a student in the class. She's sort of like a TA, but it's not quite that sort of thing. But again, my understanding of it is she'll have sessions and she'll have online things that you're talking about doing outside of class. She reiterates, and sometimes you guys practice some of the ideas we go over in class. In my experience, because I've had other SIs in the past, where it's really successful for you guys is 2 things. One, she can explain ideas just differently from me, right? Obviously, there's an age gap, as some people have like scathingly pointed out. But also, sometimes I use words you maybe, or I speak in a way that you maybe, or you're just like, what? And she can help with that, right? Like she's a little closer to your level in multiple ways. The second thing that you may care about a little more is to encourage attendance at SI. And we'll have to work this out with like how many sessions she's going to have. We'll figure this out next week. But basically it's like, if you go X number of sessions before a paper is due, I give you 5 points on that paper. So it's a nice little, yeah. So you guys like that. I need like the second one more. What?
Can't get anything lower than 5.
Well, I don't know. I mean, anyway, but no, like I said, we'll figure that out a little more specifically next week, but that's kind of how that works. You guys tend to like that part. All right. All that out of the way, let's talk about a syllabus. All right. As this heats up, is this anybody's first class? A couple of you? Okay. First day is always like this. I get through the syllabus pretty quick, but it's still, like, we're like pretty much required to do this, so just strap in. It's going to be all right. All right. This is our syllabus. You can find it in a couple different spots on CourseDen, but this is the version I like. There's all the class information at the top. This is my information. That's me. This is my office, Pafford 304, so it's just one floor up from where we are now. J, because it's a cubicle. It's nice, right? Here's my email address, tpayne@wesco.edu. I know. Office hours. I'm 95% sure these are going to be what they're going to be this semester, just because stuff is weird, right? But they're Monday, Wednesday, 12:30 to 1:30, and then virtually Tuesday, Thursday, 9 to 11:30, which means I'll most likely be at home or in my office. I'll have like a laptop open. You could email me. You can Google chat with me. I believe there's a video function. I don't know why we would use that. That strikes me as upsetting, but we could. A note on my physical office hours. I am never telling you not to come to my office hours. I'm not doing that, okay? But it's a cubicle. You see how we're all sitting right now. I can spread and touch all the sides of my cubicle. Do you follow me? Like, if you come to my office, it's going to be something like I'm leaning out the side and be like, all right, so what's going on? And you're going to be like down the way, and we're going to talk like that, I guess. It's going to be weird. So, anyway. All right. There's a lot of support stuff through here that some of you may find helpful. It's there. All right. Course description. English 1102, in my understanding, is meant to accomplish two things. Number one, it's supposed to build upon 1101. A lot of 1101 here is like rhetorical analysis and things like this. We build on those same practices, those same skills, right? But we ask a little more of you. I would hope that that's assumed, right, in the next class. The second part of this class, though, most degrees at this school, I'm sure not all of them, but most of them, have some kind of lit component or lit requirement. I take that seriously with my 1102, so I also try to prepare you for that next class if you have to take a class like that, okay? So we're going to look at some lit, it's okay. And we're going to talk about research and how to actually talk about literature, again, with the goal of preparing you for that next class, if that next class is on your schedule somewhere, right? To that end, we have 3 texts. The first one, we're going to read poems for Unit 1. Don't freak out. It's okay. But they are all from this book, The Art of the Lathe by B.H. Fairchild. Quick note on that, you do not have to buy this book, okay? I've typed up all the poems. They are on CourseDen. All the poems we're going to read anyway. So So you don't have to buy, you can buy this if you want, but you do not have to, okay? Okay. The next book we're going to use for Unit 2, you do have to buy. I did not type this. Super famous novel, Kurt Vonnegut's Slaughterhouse-Five, can be found damn near anywhere that sells books. Does anybody already buy a copy? Anybody already have one? Okay. Did you get it at the bookstore? How much was it? It's not my money, but I don't know. It was probably relatively cheap, I'd imagine.
Yeah, I think because it was like 10% off if you would have bought it then.
Yeah.
So it was like less.
Well, even that, I mean, I couldn't see it being more than like $10.
I think it's like
Sure. I mean, and you could realistically find it for cheaper online, even if you wanted to. It's super famous, which means there are a gazillion copies of it out there. Okay. But you will need a copy of this at some point. What's up?
I was gonna ask like a specific date in which we need that by.
After we turn in the first paper, whenever that is.
Okay.
It's down the road. You got some time.
Okay.
All right. Last but not least, for our third unit, we're going to be watching and talking about Die Hard, starring Bruce Willis. Has anybody never seen this movie? Oh, that's so good. I'm so pumped for you guys to have to watch this. Because that is what it is, right? Like, I'm requiring you. This is an 80s action movie. Yeah. Very different from what we're, in some ways, from what we're going to look at before we get to it. But that's a lot of fun. I like to end class on a fun note. So. Okay, those are our texts. And along with that, I feel like very briefly I should explain to you the theme of the class. So in some ways, this is a bit of a gender studies course. You've probably heard the term feminism before, which is both a proper and a necessary, I think, field of study. But on the flip side of that, in this class, I like to examine masculinity, the sort of roles that we have for people, specifically most of the time men, sort of stereotypical assumptions, how they work on people, how they work on us. We may not even realize it, right? So that's why I chose these texts. We're going to talk about that this semester. Let's see. Oh, you guys will like it. Well, you won't like this part, but you will find it helpful. I have a breakdown of all of our major assignments. Okay? You have your 3 papers, sort of when they're due, how much of your grade they're worth, page counts, stuff like that. You have presentations, more on that very, very later. Don't even worry about it right now. And then last but not least, process writing. This is a fancy word for homework. Basically, anything you turn into me that is not a major assignment falls under process writing. Okay? I believe 100% of it will be turned in on CourseDen. I can't guarantee that. Some of it's on Turnitin. It'll all be online. But the thing you need to pay attention to is it's 30% of your grade. Okay? There are 2 ways to interpret that number. One is, Jesus, that's really big. And it is. And that can be daunting. The other way to interpret it, though, is it's homework. If you seem to try, like honestly try on your homework, you're going to do fine on it. Okay? I make it 30% for the people that are like, I can at least pretend to give a damn, and that 30% will help you help your grade. Okay? Some of you in here, I've taught enough. I know how this goes. Some of you will do like none of your homework. That 30% is going to sting. Right? I'm trying to be upfront with you. Do your damn homework. Okay? Help yourself out. And the other thing, and this is real, I have to look at your work. I am never going to assign you busy work. It is all meant to practice what the paper is going to be about or help you think about what you're going to write. It's all meant to help you do better on papers as well. Okay? So you can think of it that way if the 30% doesn't grab you. Because I don't want to look at work. I'll be real honest with you. It's awful. Okay. Questions so far? Sweet. We're almost done. I know it doesn't seem like it, but we are. Rubrics are available on CourseDen. I'll highlight that at some point. Communication etiquette. I took this section from my wife. I edited some parts. My wife is much more professional than I am. For instance, I'm very transparent with you guys. she's picking me up after this class because we're going to go see my son's pre-K that he starts soon. She'll probably be in a dress, right? You see, I look like mom dropped me off at the mall. So it's like, I took this from her. There's a lot of like, be professional. Just don't be a jerk when we're talking to each other. That's basically all I care about. You'd be surprised. I know that seems like a low bar, but it's not. All right. I respond quickly. Class schedule. Okay. This is what you should really care about. This is day-to-day, sort of what did we do in class? What are we going to do? When is stuff due? A lot of do's. Okay? So if you're ever not sure about what's happening in class, this is one of the first places you should go, is the class calendar, right? And it's near the bottom, sort of second half of the syllabus, right? To begin with, August. I've broken it into weeks. I mentioned that in the welcome video. If you happen to watch it, if you happen to not, you should do that. Anyway, week 1. Here's us in class. First day of class, we're doing it. Review syllabus, we're doing it. Class introductions, we did it. COVID changes. I'm about to kind of talk about the one main one. And then how do we read poetry, which we're going to do here in a minute. It's going to be fun. Okay, so that's what's going on the first week, right? You are currently living it. Week 2, we have the dates here in case you get lost. What are we doing? Well, in class, we're going over the paper 1 prompt. We're going to briefly review MLA, and we're going to practice a bit of analysis. Okay, that's what the first paper is. Homework. Homework, unless otherwise stipulated, will be due at the end of that week, okay? So if you want to get ahead of the game, you might do this explication of little boy, which I'll explain what that is in class. Sometime in the middle of the week, right? Maybe after we talk about it. That's when I would do it. But if you get behind, or you forget, or let's be real, if you're a little bit lazy, it's due the 22nd. It has to be in by the 22nd, okay? Because after that, we're moving on to the next thing. I've broken this into weeks because we have to break our classes into 2, right? I could not figure out a fair way, ultimately, to be like, okay, this stuff is due by Monday's class, this stuff is due by Wednesday's class. Because like for you guys, I'm like, all right, this is due by Monday's class, and you're like, what? The fuck is that? What are we doing? I don't even, right? Because we won't see each other. That's madness. So this is what we're trying, okay? Questions about any of that? Cool. All right. Last thing we're going to do. If you could, please, log into Coursden. Go ahead and take a minute to do that. Now, I asked my last class and nobody raised a hand, and then 2 people struggled mightily. Does anybody not know what Coursden is? It's okay. Everybody feels good about that? Okay. My last class lied to me, so. While you guys are logging into that, if you could go to our class page. I want you to go to week 1, and under week 1 there is a poem. James writes, Autumn begins in Martins Ferry, Ohio, if you would open that up. Now while you were doing that, I am kind of curious. When I say poetry, we're going to talk about poems. Do you guys have any sort of preconceptions about that? Like, what do you guys know about poetry? You feel like you know anything?
Is it rap poetry?
Do what?
Is it rap poetry? What people say?
Is that a thing now?
Apparently, I don't know. That's what I'm asking. I don't know.
I would imagine maybe that's derived from slam poetry in a way, or just from the rap genre, which is poetry of a sort. No. It's by a guy named James Wright. It's published in 1959. So that's not what this is, but yeah, that could kind of be it. I was thinking a little more like, because when I think of poetry, when I was in your position, I would have thought of like what I was made to study in school. I never encountered real poetry until I got to college, right? I thought I knew what it was, and then I found out I was like super wrong. Like, can you guys think of any poets you've maybe read?
Shakespeare's obviously a big one.
Yeah, sure, Shakespeare. There you go. Anybody else?
honestly don't remember.
Okay,
The dude that was talking about the road less traveled or something like that?
Robert Frost.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did anybody read that at a graduation or something?
No, I think we have
Graduation.
They used to do that. They used to read a graduate because it's supposed to be really uplifting, right? And I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. That's how that poem ends. You're supposed to be like, oh, that made all the difference, right? Yeah, it's not what that poem's about. He says that with a sigh. The end of that poem is, and with a sigh, and he gives those 2 lines. And earlier in the poem, he looks down one path, he looks down the other, and he says, oh, they're really about the same. The point of that poem is that he doesn't know how the other path would have gone. It could be, he could have made a great decision, or maybe not. There's no, but it gets read as this like, yeah, but that's not what it is. People don't read the fucking poem. Yeah. That's what you guys are probably gonna do that today, by the way. It's gonna be fun for me. It might be fun for you, I don't know, but it's gonna be fun for me. All right. Last thing I should say before we read it, hopefully you've had time to open it now. Autumn Begins in Martins Ferry, Ohio. Again, this is by James Wright, published in 1959. If you look at it, you're like, hey, that's short. This class isn't going to be so bad. The other thing I will say, there are 2 words in particular in this poem that I want to briefly warn you about. They are offensive. They were offensive even back in 1959, although I would argue maybe less so, right? It is 2020. It's a different place and time. But I don't mind showing you the poem. I don't actually like saying the words very much, but I do feel like they're very important to the poem. So I'm going to say them when I read it because I think they're doing something in the poem that we're going to talk about. Yes?
I'm sorry, where was I
Are you on course 10?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you get to week 1? Do you see that? You might have to click on content, and then you go to unit 1, which is what we're in, analysis,
Okay.
and then week 1, and you open the poem. Got it? Sweet. Anyway, there's 2 words. You'll know when we hit them, I imagine, that I do not say outside of this poem. Okay, let's put it that way. But again, I think they're there for a reason. So I'm going to say them when we read them. I just wanted you to know that. All right. Autumn begins in Martins Ferry, Ohio. In the Shreve High football stadium, I think of Polacks nursing long beers in Tiltonsville, and gray faces of Negroes in the blast furnace at Benwood, and the ruptured night watchmen of Wheeling Steel, dreaming of heroes. All the proud fathers are ashamed to go home. Their women cluck like starved pullets, dying for love. Therefore, their sons grow suicidally beautiful at the beginning of October, and gallop terribly against each other's bodies. That's the whole poem. That's it. Right? What we're going to do today, super low pressure, okay? But we're going to start the kind of process that we're going to use to actually write our papers. Okay? The first step is easy. Just what is going on? We're going to talk about like, well, what does it mean? We're going to do that. But before all that, narrative. What's the plot of this thing? What is happening? What does this poem, just on a surface level, seem to be about, do you think?
Football.
Why do you say that?
In the first thing he said, in the Shreve High football stadium, so.
Very good. You blew a couple people's minds with that observation. I'm telling you. I've taught this poem enough times. So be like, oh shit, that is in the first line. That's how quickly we can zone out, by the way. So if we just drop some new information to you just now, know that about yourself. Know you got to be a little more attentive, right? That happens. It's all good. Yeah, we're talking about football, aren't we? We're in a stadium. If you even, especially after you encounter that information, if you go back and look at the title, Autumn Begins in Martins Ferry, Ohio. Now, outside of this year, because things are different, what typically happens in the fall?
Football.
Football starts, right? It's football season, right? Okay. So yeah, we're talking about that. We're thinking about that in some way. Good. Now what's interesting about that, we get some football in this poem, and we're going to talk about it obviously. after that first line, though, are we talking about football? No. What on earth? Like, that is a right turn, isn't it? What are we talking about in those next couple lines, do you guys think? That's all. This is we're just going to figure out narrative, right? So that's what we're doing now.
Maybe the
I mean, it's people that would be in the crowd, yeah. But again, what kind of people are they? What is some information we get about these people?
They're black.
Black people.
In the third line, African Americans, yes.
like they're talking about work, long hours of work, nursing long beers, talking about them working in the blast furnace, wheeling
Yeah.
steel.
Okay, you're throwing a lot. Hold on, real quick. We got black folks in the third line. Second line, that P word. That's one of those words. You might know who that is?
People from home.
Polish folks. That's a very unkind word, I believe stemming from the World Wars for Polish people. Yeah. So we got Polish folks, we got black folks. Long beers in Tiltonsville. What on earth is a long beer? If you had to guess. Is it like a trough that everybody shares? Like it's
I'm
long?
not gonna lie, that's what I was thinking of.
Huh?
I was thinking of that.
A trough?
Yeah.
Oh, girl.
Or really tall glass.
It's tall. Yeah, I was making a joke, man. Come on, you know. Yes. It's just a way that some people, it's slang, right? For a tall beer, long beer. They're nursing it, though. They're kind of sipping on it. Okay? So they're at the bar, I would imagine. That's where people do that sort of thing. The next line, these African American folks, they're working at a blast furnace. Now, clearly, I have not done much hard work lately. So I'm not really up on what a blast furnace might be. What do you guys imagine a blast furnace is? What does it sound like?
I know on Minecraft, it's when you put it, like, you put the thing, and it, like, warms it up really fast.
Yeah.
Like some kind of blacksmithing furnace, possibly. That's what I would picture.
Some kind of what, Dada?
Like blacksmithing, metalwork. furnace.
It sounds intense. Like a furnace, all on its own, like is like this is pretty. But a blast furnace takes up another little. Great Minecraft reference, very funny. Yeah. Well, and even if, because again, you shouldn't necessarily know everything when you first encounter it. How do we know what that blast furnace is specifically? We find out. What is it? Where is it?
What is that bend wood?
Yeah, keep going. Where are we when we're talking about that furnace? A little further. You don't have to go real far. You gotta go further than that. Wheeling steel. Where is this furnace? What are they making? It's a steel mill, right? So they're nursing long beers, I suppose after work. They're working at a steel mill. What kind of job is a steel mill?
Really labor intensive.
Labor intensive? Seems like hard work. Yeah?
Backbreaking.
Perhaps.
Yeah.
Yeah? We've all seen movies, right? How do you envision the kind of person that works at a steel mill? Like, what do they look like? What do they do? What kind of life do they have?
Sweaty.
Sweaty?
Yeah.
Sure.
Sometimes it's like kids.
Back in the day.
Yeah, back in the day.
At least by 1959, we had like some laws. They're sure, but I don't think there were kids there in the 50s. But I feel you.
They're probably strong, but they lifted metal all day.
You would think, yeah, like pretty good shape and
Probably,
pretty dirty.
Probably look like a football player.
Maybe.
Referencing to the.
Sure. There's some of that possibly in play. Good. Okay. What kind of?
There's a lot of soot on them too.
Oh yeah, no, I'm saying they gotta be like greasy almost, right? I think. Again, we've seen movies. So, what kind of lives do these guys have outside of that job? Do you think? See, why do you say that? See, that's interesting. I don't disagree, but why do you feel like that's the case?
homeless people, if they have the opportunity and the funds to get a higher paying job, they'll take that rather than working like labor intensive jobs.
Well, the point I'm making though, and I don't dispute that either, is are we all kind of working under the assumption that the people working at this steel mill don't make a lot of money? Why is that? Somebody said no?
Why would you choose to work at a steel mill?
Do what?
Why would you choose to work at a steel mill?
Well, that's a question we're going to have to answer at the end of the poem. But yeah, I think most of us, if given the choice, they're like, no, I'm good, I'll pass on the blast furnace, thanks. Yeah, but why do we assume it's low paying? Sounds like hard work. They probably make money, right? Black folks and the Polish folks, and it is the 50s, but even just that work, right? Like,
Well, also, it might be like a lower tier job. Like we were talking about, nobody really wants it, so.
what kind of job is it? We have a great term for this kind of.
I forget, but it's like, I think blue collar or white collar, one of the two kind of.
Blue collar.
Yeah, I just
The
didn't
blue
know
collar
which
job.
one.
You're good. Yeah. Hard work, usually physically demanding, low paying. Seems to be how we often describe blue collar work, right? And I think this qualifies. We would all agree with that. All right, so why go down that path? Well, understand, we started the very beginning of the poem with, okay, we're talking about football. Hard right turn, blue collar work, these particular ethnicities, these particular nationalities, sort of disenfranchised folks, right? And this is where I come back to, I think those words are intentional. Like if I was going to write a paper about this poem, I would point to the fact that he doesn't say, and African Americans in Benwood, right? No, he uses that word, right? On purpose, I think, to talk about the ways that these people are marginalized, not just in terms of their job, but maybe also in terms of their skin color, or for the Polish folks, for their nationality, right? We get this, I would argue, almost complete image of what their lives are in like 2 lines, right? You know so much about not just their work life, but their life after it. And it sounds awful. All right, it sounds hard in all kinds of ways. Okay. So we got that. And then the last line of that stanza. A stanza, by the way, it's Italian for little room. You don't care, and that won't matter. But it's a paragraph, basically, in a poem. Okay? So we go football. Man, this life sounds hard. To what? How do we end this stanza? Dreaming of heroes. That feels like another term. Who is dreaming of heroes? Okay. Who are they dreaming about?
I think it ties back to like football,
Uh-huh.
because football is a large part of culture and
Sure.
is very central to like family. So maybe they're dreaming of like heroic people or icons in football that could possibly be hopeful or inspiring.
I think so. I think it's definitely on the table, given the information we have at this point in the poem, right? Now, what we have to sort out by the end of the poem, though, is specifically sort of who those icons are. And we'll table that, but yeah, I think that's in play. Okay. Next stanza. All the proud fathers are ashamed to go home. That's a sentence unto itself. All the proud fathers are ashamed to go home. So let's start here. Proud fathers. Who's proud? Why? Proud of what?
Their kids,
Why do you say that?
because it says their sons in the next one, so it's just.
Okay, good. And well, just the phrase proud fathers would kind of
Mhm.
imply.
Something about somebody's kids.
Do we have any idea of what they might be proud about or proud of?
I'm just proud for providing,
Do I know?
proud for providing for them.
Who's providing for whom?
The fathers provide for them.
Are they?
The son, and they're coming back from work and playing football.
They're proud of their sons for playing football. Maybe so. That ties back to the heroes thing too, maybe a little bit, right? We're talking about football a lot in this small town. Okay. What else might the fathers be proud? What else might they be proud of? Talking about blue collar workers, right? Seems to be these guys. What might they be proud of?
Like their masculinity or manliness
Yeah.
in a sense.
That's one of those weird check boxes that we still have as a culture, right? If you work a blue collar job, you're like inherently more masculine, right? Because it is physically demanding and hard and shitty. There's something weirdly tied to you're seen as more of a man if you somehow engage in behavior that's like, dude, that sucks. Okay. And yeah, they can be proud. Both of those things can be true at the same time in this poem. I see no problem with that, right? The interesting thing, though, is they're proud fathers who are ashamed to go home. Wow, that's weird, right? That's a weird sentence. We just said they were proud, but now they're ashamed also. Does anybody know how to square that? Yeah, go ahead.
I was thinking it might be referring to like how they were drinking after work, so they go home after work, returning home drunk, and then it talks about
I mean, we don't know that they're drunk. They say they're nursing long beers.
they could be under the influence or
Yeah.
intoxicated.
I mean, yeah. I guess that's possible. But even that, I don't know what that would really say other than like, because I mean, if they were truly ashamed of it, I don't know if they'd be doing it, right?
Oh, alcoholism.
Yeah, do we know they're alcoholics?
Could be.
We have to be able to point to the poem and argue it.
Yeah.
All we know is that they sip beer, which I've lived a little more of a life than probably most of you. I'm just older. I've met some alcoholics. They're not known for sipping. But we can table that. That's okay. What else might they be ashamed of? Because, again, specifically we say they're ashamed to go home. Why are they ashamed to go home?
You don't want to see their wife?
Why? We've got to kind of suss this out. What do we know about these guys?
What do you say?
Yeah, no, the masks, man. He said they're ashamed to see their wives.
Or maybe
I think it's because of their pay. Because they're blue collar workers, so it just seems like they, like we said, they don't get paid much. So then when they come home, they're like, oh, I don't have much to come home to anyway.
So isn't that interesting? That on the one hand, and again, it's all in this single sentence, these proud fathers, proud of their sons perhaps, and we'll talk more about that, but also proud of the work they do, right? The effort they put in, and the ways that that sort of makes them feel more masculine, right? Absolutely. I think especially when you break it down like that, we can all like, that's in this poem. I can see that. Okay. But at the end of that sentence, we haven't even left this sentence behind. Those same guys are ashamed to go home, specifically to go home. You got to think about what home is, right?
Maybe they don't like what their house looks like.
Sure. Well, but again, if we're thinking about what their home would be, and even this is the 50s, right? Like, who's paying for that house?
The government.
It's your parents, the man of the house, like especially with being masculinity.
The men are paying for that house.
Men are supposed to provide for the whole family.
Exactly. And now we come to the question of how good a job are they able to do in terms of providing? They're not making much money. They're not providing very well. So just in that one line, you get this great sort of dissonance that these guys live inside of, right? Super proud of the work they do, maybe even the sons they have, the kind of life they lead to a degree, right? But the result of that work and of that life also makes them ashamed, right? So they succeed, but they fail at the same time. All in that one line. Okay. Next line. Their women cluck like starved pullets, dying for love. The line real quick we just left is in stop. That's a single sentence unto itself. This line is in jammed. We'll talk about that more next time. But basically, we don't stop with sort of summary punctuation at the end of this starved pullets line, right? And what that means is, when we talk about it, We can talk about that line by itself, or if we want to, we can continue the thought, because the thought does continue, to dying for love. If that made no sense, I'm going to illustrate what I mean right now. Their women cluck like starved pullets. Whose women?
The hardworking men,
Okay. Who are these women?
the wives at home. All the
Okay. And what are we not calling them? Wives and... Sure, but what else are they in this poem? Like, we only got certain groups of people. They're wives and mothers. And they're neither one of those in this line. They're women. That feels pretty intentional to me, to call them that. Okay? Their women cluck like starved pullets. What on earth is a pullet? It's a very good use in context clues, I assume. Might be. What do you do if you don't know a word?
Google it.
You look it up. Yeah, just type it into Google. What do we have? A hen. What is a hen supposed to do? What is a hen for?
Take care of the egg.
Reproduce and watch the nest. What are these women being compared to now? What are they supposed to do?
Chicken.
Supposed to reproduce and watch the nest. And they're dying for love. They're dying for it. A couple different ways to take that. We don't have time to talk about it. But so in the first stanza you get, hey, we're talking about football. They're like, we're talking about some other stuff first. We get to see the town these guys live in, the work lives they have. We get to see they're ashamed to come home. We find out what the mom's life is like. All of it fairly grim. We agree to that? Okay. Why? And this might be a hard question. We might not be able to answer, but I want to raise it. Why does this, when I say this life seems kind of grim, and several of you looked at me and were like, yeah, what about it seems so shitty?
It seems tedious.
What do you mean by that?
Like it's, well,
I'm not disagreeing. I want to push on that some.
it's like they work these long hours inside the steel mill,
Mm-hmm.
and then after that, they don't really have much to do except come home where they're ashamed to even be there.
Yeah. Well, tedium to me too, like almost like overly routine, like same every day sort of. Maybe. What else about it?
It just sounds like a struggle. They don't got no money. They got a bad job.
Yeah.
They it's like they getting like slandered, like harsh names calling, like
Yeah.
a bunch of bad stuff.
Well, this seems a little redundant, but I asked for a good reason. What's so bad about the struggle? What's so bad about it?
It's not the high life, I guess. It's not where the money is. I mean, that's just where people, as a society, always look to. Like they want to have the riches. They want they want to be proud to come to their home.
Why do we want that money? Why do we want that life? Do you
To
think?
buy the freedom that come with it.
So what is that freedom?
The financial freedom, being able to buy the things that you want and being able to flash those things. Like
Yeah. Freedom's more than that, though. I mean, that you're doing a pretty good job. We'll table that for a minute, but that's in play too, right? And it didn't take us long to get there. He only took a couple steps, right? But all the information we have in these first two stanzas, if we take a step back at this point and say, all right, clearly the lives of these people is kind of hard. And by the way, some of you are like, how did we even get here? All we've done, for the most part, is work with narrative. We could go into more linguistic choices. I've alluded to a few. But for the most part, just like what is actually happening? What do we know about the lives of these folks? If you slow down, oh girl. If you slow down like we have, you can do this too, right? No one in here should have a problem if you encounter a poem like this. I'm like, where do they work? You can figure that out, right? You just go to that next line. All right, I just want to, all right. But what we're saying here, some element of freedom is lacking for these folks. That might be important. Because all of that said, the therefore that starts the third stanza to me basically works like an equal sign, right? It's like stanza 1 plus stanza 2. That whole world equals what I'm about to tell you in stanza 3, right? Therefore, their sons grow suicidally beautiful at the beginning of October and gallop terribly against each other's bodies. Part of that I think we can pretty easily solve. What's the last line? What's going on there?
Okay.
Was it Hava? What did you say?
Oh, I just said it's definitely equal.
Yeah, it's football, right? Some element of colliding. I mean, it's a beautiful way to put it. Galloping terribly against each other's bodies. Sounds very violent, right? Vince Lombardi was famous for saying, football is not a contact sport, it's a collision sport, right? You get that sense in that last line. But especially when we have the 2 lines preceding it, first of all, who's growing suicidally beautiful?
The people's sons who are working.
So these boys. So the fathers and the mothers we just talked about. Moms only get like a line and a half. But those folks, their sons grow suicidally beautiful at the beginning of October, when football season is really getting underway, right? Okay. Beauty, if I had to ask you for a definition, I would wager most of you would not mention suicide. Pretty low down the list. Okay. So that's kind of weird, right? It's almost like we would circle that and be like, well, something's got to be going on there. I don't know what it is, but that seems important, right? Suicidally beautiful. What's suicidal?
The sons, possibly.
But how? You know?
Because they're pushed into this image that society has created, that they have to be masculine and burly, and possibly the fathers, because they've grown up in this situation too, working blue-collar jobs, could possibly be pushing their sons to be doing football.
I appreciate what you're doing with that possibly. You're trying to hedge. But there is absolutely this question of, I mean, we can talk about motivations in a second, right? That's the part you're worried about. But before all that, suicidally, I mean, we're saying they're galloping terribly against each other's bodies. Like, that sounds like, at least metaphorically, they're killing themselves, right? To do this. It sounds rough. Now, the parallel you drew, you did it earlier and you did it again, right, is in some ways we can think about how that's similar to what the fathers are doing. And maybe even, like at one point, just before this, we said the mothers are dying for love, right? So there's death there. That's a connection. But you're saying these other folks, these adults in the town, are sort of killing themselves too, right? Metaphorically, right? We have that phrase, I'm killing myself at work sort of thing, right? We're used to that. Yes. But something in this poem says, the speaker says, that it's suicidally beautiful. It's a beautiful thing, these boys, and if we're going to use kind of what you're on, maybe even these fathers and these mothers too. But what's beautiful about killing yourself? Even if it's only metaphorical. I mean, we just spent a lot of time talking about how awful the lives of these people sound, right? What could be beautiful about any of that?
The memories that you make, or like the pride you have for what you do.
I mean, they do talk about that. The fathers are prideful. But at the end of the day, when they get home, they're ashamed, right?
I think it's in reference to like football. Like I think what they're trying to say is like, because their parents work so hard every day, they get to like take the time to play football. Like, wouldn't it be like suicidally beautiful? Like, that's what they're referring to before they get to tackle it and stuff like that.
Sure. And most ostensibly we're talking about, because they say their sons, like literally we're talking about those folks. So let's stick to that, and then we can maybe play your parallel game here in a minute. But what's beautiful about what these boys are doing?
People cheering them on.
I think our speaker would argue they're cheering them on because of what's beautiful.
I guess the passion in football, or
Yeah, but what is it in this poem? We're not talking about fucking team spirit. Let's get that out of the way, right? We're not doing that. So what's beautiful here? That's a strong word. Probably never really use that for football, right? What's beauty in this town, in this poem? Who are these boys in this town?
Maybe it's that whole Dreaming of Heroes thing. They're considered.
That's a nice callback. We said at one point that potentially these boys are the heroes of these workers, right? So they're dreaming of heroes. According to that reading, I guess they're dreaming of them while they're at work, maybe, right? Okay. What's heroic about these boys? Who are they heroes to? Start there.
Maybe their fathers,
Yeah. Why?
because they serve this societal image that, like,
No, I don't know if you know, I'm smiling because like I'm a pessimist as well. On the one hand, yeah, you can make that case that they're kind of you sort of saying they're serving their purpose in a way,
yeah, like
playing their role.
yeah, I suppose, like, according to this poem, I don't think that men should, like, have to be subject to that, but.
Well, our speaker, I don't think is necessarily saying like this is how things this is how things should be. They're just describing it, right? Sure. Well, what? On the one hand, yes, but to a man, I don't think you would walk up to one of these dudes and be like, "Hey, you think your son's like serving their role in society, right?" They're like, "What?" Like for them, like what's heroic about their boys playing in this football game?
What is there, like, good stuff they can't do when their sons are considered, like,
Why can't they do it?
because they're working blue-collar jobs, they probably never got the chance to.
Well, they can't do it now. Yeah, when you're like a real adult, all kinds of shit goes out the window. Sure. One of my favorite Cat Williams bits, he's talking about when Michael Jackson climbed a tree when he was like arrested.
Don't you climb trees?
Don't you climb trees? He's like, no, we got bills and shit. Yeah. You have responsibility when you're an adult. A lot. You have a lot of it. It gets in the way. You can't go play football. You can't climb trees. So these boys have some of that freedom we were talking about earlier, right? It's beautiful to get to see that for these other people in the town. But it's suicidally beautiful. And I would argue, there's at least two reasons. One is the easier one we've talked about. Given that very last line, it sounds like a pretty violent game. Sounds like they're really going through some things. Okay. Why else?
Because it might be short-lived,
Why do you say that?
because soon you'll be in the working world like their father.
That's very good.
They might also be, like, looking at it kind of with some jealousy, in a sense that they know they can't ever have that freedom, and so it's beautiful to see other people
Well,
enjoying it.
This is where I'm going to join your reading with yours, because we are almost out of time. You say, first of all, we're going to do yours first, and then we're going to come back to yours. You say they're going to join the working world. Why do you say that?
Because they're only kids now, but, like, soon they can't play football forever, like we said.
Well, they could, right? My last class was all about this. Like, what's going to happen after this game? Where are they going to go? Their fathers are proud. Why? Like, what's the happy ending you guys are used to seeing in movies?
There isn't any, like, this is the 50s. This is life.
Stuff happened for people in the 50s. Just maybe not in Martin's Ferry. Yeah, there is no score. There are no scholarships. Those are not our concerns, right? You could almost argue they're not even on the table for these people.
No.
They're growing suicidally beautiful. That beauty itself is suicidal. It's dying. It's ending. Autumn begins. What comes after autumn?
Winter.
Winter. Most of you are either in high school or pretty fresh out of it. Your last winter in high school, what's after that? Yeah, and what's after that?
College or work.
Unless you're these guys. Because again, at no point have we said, oh, this guy's going to Ohio State, or this guy's, So after high school, we're at,
Steel.
you're going to fucking mill. How'd their dads get there?
It's the same way probably.
They played football once in high school for their dads. Yep. And their mothers lived a very similar life, and it just keeps circling around.
I see the connection now when you were talking about like the people in the steel mill being like big and stuff, like a football player would be.
Yeah, well, you brought that up. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's callbacks through it, but it's also, that brings me to, with like the 3 minutes or whatever we have left, this question of beauty. What's beautiful here? It's beautiful for the fathers, for living through them vicariously, and we're used to that narrative, okay. And yeah, they fit some societal standards as well, and we can talk about that. But here's the happy ending of this poem, and I mean it. This is the happiest ending for these people. It's beautiful because it's suicidal. Because the people in the stands understand that it's going to end for these boys. But knowing that, they know how beautiful it is in the moment. You see what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So they can celebrate it while at the same time almost mourning it. It takes me back to that line about proud fathers ashamed to go home. It's the same dissonance. It's so beautiful, but it's also suicidal. Like it is ending. That's the best these people can get. When we talk about freedom, I think what we often mean here in a capitalist society that we have is opportunity. You have the opportunity to go do any number of things. These people don't. Yeah. So anyway, for next time, please look at your syllabi, as I pointed out. All you really owe me in terms of being prepared, first of all, I'm going to send you an email, because we've had a few people add, a few people drop, right? Whether you're a Monday or Wednesday crew, I'm going to send you hopefully what's a final list on that. But also, before you come to class, please read on Coursed In 2 poems, Old Men Playing Basketball and Little Boy. Okay? Have those read before you come, because we're going to talk about them. Do you have a question, man?
Oh, no.
Okay. Everybody good?
You said it was which ones again, I'm sorry?
It's on the syllabus, but Old Men Playing Basketball and Little Boy. All right. I'll see you guys next time. Thank you.